Hi everyone, this is Jathu from Property Framework, and today I want to talk about a common dilemma that most people have when they're about to buy their first property in Australia. And that's whether they should buy an investment property or whether they should buy their first home. Now, whether you go down the path of an investment property or a first home, you should carefully plan it out and look at its implications for the next 20 years or so. And therefore, that's exactly what this video is about. I'm considering two scenarios here. One where you buy a first home, person A buys a first home, and then we have person B who buys an investment property instead of buying a first home. And we want to see how both of these scenarios play out and which one would be better from a wealth creation perspective. So the path that most people take really is going down the first home route, right? And that's because there's an emotional attachment to a first home. There's a sense of security, there's a sense of pride that people have with their homes, and therefore that is the common decision that is usually taken. However, when you go down that path, that can seriously impact your ability to build wealth through property investment unless you're a really high income earner. If you are an average income earner, mid to average income earner, then you should consider what the implications would be if you decide to buy that home to live in, because that would reduce your ability to buy investment properties down the line. And the reason for that is, let's take this scenario here where someone has a purchasing power of 1.2 million, right? So they max out that borrowing capacity and buy a home to live in for 1.2 million, and that means there is no borrowing capacity left to buy any investment properties, right? So for the next few years they are not able to buy any investment properties, but gradually over time, as the incomes increase and the situation changes, eventually they'll come to a position where they can borrow and buy an investment property. So let's say about 10 years later they buy an investment property for $500,000. Okay, and again, they're maxing out their borrowing capacity, and there's no option to kind of further buy more properties down the line. Okay, so when a person has this kind of situation, they bought a first home and then they bought an investment property 10 years down the line. How does their situation look like in about 20 years down the line? We're going to look at that, but just before that, we want to look at another scenario as well. So that is the alternative approach. So we have a person B here who does not want to buy a first home. They want to rent out, right? So they're renting out, and then let's say that they rent out in the same suburb that person A has bought a home in. So person A has bought a home for $1.2 million. In today's interest rates environment, as of June 2024, it's almost around 6% interest rates if you buy a home to live in, and that costs around $6,500 to $7,000 in mortgage repayments. So if person B rents out in that same suburb, they're going to pay around $600 to $700 a week, which comes to around $3,000 or slightly higher than that in rental repayments. So you can already see there's a huge difference between the mortgage repayment and the rental repayment. Even if you just take the interest only component of the mortgage repayment, that could even be higher than the rental repayments. So that means that the person who decides to rent actually has a better cash flow. Like rent money is not really dead money as long as you use that excess cash flow to do something constructive, for example buy investment properties and build wealth that way. So this person B, he wants a better cash flow. He doesn't want to have a very big mortgage and stress um, for himself. So he decides that he would rent out and buy investment properties, right? And he wants to buy a few investment properties so that eventually he can achieve financial freedom and also get passive income coming in through from those properties. So I had told you earlier, let's go back to that first person, person A, and what they have done, right? So you can see year one, they've purchased a property for $1.2 million dollars, and they're paying mortgage repayments of $7,000 a year. Okay, and that's stressful. Like people on average incomes or slightly higher than average incomes, paying $7,000. Pardon me, that's not 7,000 a year. That's 7,000 a month. But paying $7,000 a month is really stressful, right? Um, there's no borrowing capacity left, of course, to buy other investment properties. And the house itself, as you know, it's a first home, so it's not generating any income. And the loan on that is also not tax deductible, right? So about 10 years later, they're buying an investment properties. Now it actually generates income, so $600 per week coming through that. But they have, again, after 10 years, maxed out their borrowing capacity by buying a $500,000 property. So at the end of 20 years, the value of the house is 2.6 million. So we're assuming that it's growing at 6% per annum. The investment property is around 900,000. The total value is $3.8 million. The cash flow from the investment property, because rents are increasing every year, is around $6,000 per annum. And of course, the cash flow for the home is going to be negative because it doesn't generate any income. It still has the mortgage repayments, your council rates, your water rates, and your insurances and things like that. So it's still going to be very negative, that the cash flow from the first home. So you can see this person does have a fairly decent asset base of 3.8 million, but the cash flow situation is really poor. There's only $6,000 coming in per year from one of the investment properties, and the home is, of course, it's draining cash out of your pocket. So not an ideal situation where you would want to be after 20 years. So let's look at the second person. Now, this second person, he has a strategic approach. So he buys two properties for $400,000. Okay, so that's 800,000 that has been used. He still has 400,000 in his borrowing capacity that is still left over. So the two investment properties are generating income of around $500 per week. The loan on that is tax deductible, and his overall cash flow situation is better because to manage this property, he only has to put in $1,000 a month in today's interest rates environment while the properties are going up in value. Now, at the end of 5 years, what he decides to do is that he decides to buy four more investment properties. Now, he only has a $400,000 borrowing capacity. So, how can he buy four more investment properties? So, that's why he takes the approach of buying buying properties under a discretionary trust structure using a corporate trustee. So, what that means is that as long as each one of those properties can trade profitably and you can get an accountant letter saying that the properties are trading profitably, the banks will not consider the debt under the properties in the trust. And therefore, you can recycle that 400,000 theoretically unlimited times and buy as many properties as possible. So, in this situation, this person decides to buy four more properties under a trust and they're renting out at $500 a week. And because these properties are under trust, he hasn't exhausted his borrowing capacity. There's still that $400,000 left that he can keep on buying properties with, right? So, of course, the tax is it's a complex structure, and you need to get advice around this from an accountant whether this structure would really suit you. Again, this is not financial advice. This is only an indication of the different approaches possible. Okay, so what happens at the end of 20 years? Now the person has six properties. His asset value at the end of 20 years is around 6.36 million. Cash flow is $47,000 per annum. And he could actually sell off three of these properties to pay down the debt on the other three. So he would have three properties which are debt free and generating rental income. And that debt free rental income is going to be close to $80,000 to $100,000. So person B now has a lot of cash flow coming in as well. He has $80,000 to $100,000 coming in cash flow, which is a very good income source coming in for him, right? So $100,000 is almost equivalent to an Australian average income. So through his property investing planned and his strategic approach to investing, he has generated this income. So you can see eventually through from a wealth building perspective, person B is in a better situation, right? So if you decide to go down the investment property path, you are definitely going to be in a better situation from a wealth creation perspective. You will generate passive income. Of course, it has to be strategic and has to be well planned. And that's exactly what I do with clients. I help them build out these plans to generate passive income through property investing and how to build out portfolios. You could be those one of those people who say that no, I don't want to rent out. I don't want to be moving from place to place. It's not something I like or something I enjoy doing. I want to have that security of having a home. I want to have that sense of ownership and pride with having a home of my own. Well, that's totally fine too. Then this investment path won't be suitable for you. You could go down the home ownership path. It just comes down to individual preference, right? If your preference is wealth building and creation of wealth through using property as a vehicle, then the approach that person B is something that you should seriously consider. So this is only a very high level overview of the different options that are available to you. I hope this got you thinking in some way around how property investing could help you generate passive income for the future.